I slip into the dining room, carrying a tray of buttered rolls, the scent of roasted turkey thick in the air. Brent glances up from his plate, his leather-strapped watch, catching the chandelier light, and grins. Still fixing broken toasters for a living, he says, and a ripple of laughter follows his words. I set the rolls down carefully, remembering how I spent evenings teaching myself soldering to help Grandpa repair his antique lamp. No one mentions that now. Mother sits at the head of the table, her perfectly pressed blouse unwrinkled even after a full day of cooking. She pushes her mashed potatoes around her plate, then looks at me and says in a voice that's all clipped consonants, "It's just hard watching you not live up to your potential." I recall how I skipped that scholarship interview at the design firm so I could drive Dad to chemo appointments, juggling traffic and pump monitors without complaint. Her words feel like cold gravy. Across from me, Dad leans toward Aunt June, who perches on the edge of her chair in high heels. He murmurs, "We don't ask him to chip in. He's still finding his way." Aunt June nods slowly, the shine of her silk scarf twitching. I remember how Dad's jovial voice animated late-night phone calls as I calculated mortgage payments after their business stalled calculations they never thanked me for. Brent lifts a crystal wine glass filled with sparkling cider and taps it against the table. "Here's to my brother the handyman," he toasts, then winks at cousin Alicia, who's busy photographing her plate with her phone. I think of the model rocket contest I missed after rearranging my class schedule to nurse Grandpa through his hospital stay. Months of late-night diagrams and drawn-out apologies. When I ask for a moment to clear the plates, Mother waves me off without looking up. Later, I hear her whisper to Grandpa in the hallway. He's making things awkward again. Grandma pats her own chest, adjusting her knitted shawl, and says, "Such a shame." I recall Grandma's tears when I moved home to help her through that winter flu, carrying grocery bags and propping her pillows while they scolded me for dropping out. Back at the sink, I scrub a casserole dish, my hands warm under the tap. I replay Brent's mocking tone, Mother's sigh, Dad's dark reassurance to Aunt June. My reflection in the window shows steam rising around my shoulders as I remember every night I limped home from work with aching feet after stocking shelves to save for their kitchen remodel, only to find they'd splurged on marble countertops. When I tentatively asked about the cost, Dad's voice had been gentle but firm. "We handled it." The dishes clatter as I stack them neatly, each plate a reminder that I've held this family up when nobody else would. I realize that these small sacrifices, repairing Grandpa's lamp, rearranging my schedule, shouldering bills, are more than just memories. They're proof that my worth isn't measured by toasters fixed or degrees completed, but by the steady hands that held them together when everything else fell apart. I'm rolling down a dusty lane when a crooked sign reading "Estate Tools, All or Nothing" stops me. The farmer who meets me by his rusted pickup rubs his sunburned neck and explains he's clearing his father's barn, sweated pride in his voice, as he lifts a tarp. I hand over the crumpled bills, while he watches warily, the exchange sealed by his nod and the jingle of metal. Back in my cramped workshop, I tip the pile onto my old workbench. A battered toolbox clatters open, spilling oily wrenches and a dozen strange clips I've never seen. I pause over a battered leather satchel. It seems fraying, and brush away decades of dust to reveal ammo. Style boxes sealed tight, corners dented. Curiosity prickles my skin as I pry one open to find neat rows of blueprints, creased by hands I'll never meet. Late into the night, I spread faded schematics across the bench, each scribble of pencil tracing curves of blades and coiled springs. A prototype plate stamped with a name, P.C. Granger, catches the light, and I read the inventor's own scrawl explaining how wind might power a pump without a drop of fuel. I laugh in disbelief when I find a tucked-away journal, the author's handwriting clear, despite yellowed pages, outlining test results and sketches of turbines small enough to fit in a farmer's hand. The next morning I call a local patent attorney at dawn, her voice hesitant when I describe equations so precise they could have powered an entire homestead. She asks for photographs, promising to dig into archives. By midday, I'm on the phone with a retired county recorder who admits he copied land deeds decades ago. He sends a scan of an old filing slip, matching Granger's name, and noting the work was never commercialized. His excitement over the discovery mirrors my own shock. Welding torch in hand, I mount a salvage shaft in my backyard. With a gentle afternoon breeze, The makeshift blades turn, and a small light on my bench flickers on. My neighbors step into the yard, skeptical at first, until they see that glow. One pats my shoulder, eyes wide, reminding me how I once fixed her broken heater without charge. Now I'm bringing her a glimpse of true off-grid power. Conversations spark in the local feed. Farmers and engineers swap messages under my posts, sharing pictures of empty barns, perfect for these micro-turbines. A community co-op leader drives across town to inspect the model in person, running her fingers over the worn metal, and nodding as she promises to bring this to a dozen homesteads. That pile of junk now hums with potential. Every greasy tool, every sealed box, every blueprint inked by Granger's steady hand proves this wasn't trash but untold promise. And in the gentle hum of my backyard prototype, I see proof that real innovation can lie hidden in the forgotten debris of someone else's past. I spent evenings hunched over that battered workbench, grease under my nails, and stray metal shavings in my hair, tracing Granger's looping equations until the old blueprints finally made sense. One corner of the notebook, I found a margin sketch of a blade profile, its edges chipped and ink smudged, so I carefully ground a scrap of aluminum into the same shape, and bolted it to a weathered hub. The first spin was disappointing. The blade flexed and wobbled until I reinforced the mount with brackets improvised from a salvaged tractor frame. That failure was proof enough that this wasn't wishful thinking. When I hauled the rebuilt model to my friend Aaron's pasture, he greeted me with a skeptical grin, hefting a flashlight to inspect the mounting bolts. He watched as I anchored the tower into the earth, the turbine's silhouette sharp against the horizon. A sudden gust rattled the fence rails, and those curved vanes caught the wind with a satisfying hum. Later, Aaron's teenage son chased me into the barn, breathless. "The fridge just kicked on," he said, pointing to the blinking digital display. That moment, seeing the cold light of the meter climb, made me certain the machine wasn't just spinning, it was delivering power. I set up my phone on a stack of crates and filmed the entire demonstration, close-ups of greasy bearings turning, the charge controller's LEDs pulsing, Aaron flipping the barn lights on and off with a triumphant laugh. When night fell, we watched shadows dance on the walls by the turbine's own glow, proof that stored energy would run the lights long after the wind died down. Early the next morning, I posted the raw footage to a small engineering forum, linking the video and Granger's yellowed notebook pages scanned from my desk. I went to sleep hearing my phone ping with comments. Someone tested a similar design with PVC blades and shared their results. Another user emailed details on sourcing vintage bearings. Seeing that conversation unfold convinced me this discovery was more than a personal triumph. It was a shared breakthrough. Days later, an email popped from a nonprofit working in remote villages. They referenced our demo and asked for a proposal to build prototypes for communities living off kerosene lamps. I drafted detailed assembly instructions, annotated with photos of my makeshift jigs and notes on reinforcing the blade mounts. Shipping crates clattered onto my porch marked fragile, renewable tech, and I wrestled them into my truck, every dent a reminder that this was real. My family never asked what the packages were. When I mentioned I'd been busy consulting, my sister shrugged and went back to her show. Yet each time I saw a notification from that NGO questions about installation sites, requests for performance logs, I felt the weight of proof in my inbox. These weren't hypothetical plans, they were contracts in the making, and communities would soon depend on the machine I'd resurrected from that dusty barn pile. Late at night, I still returned to the workshop, run my fingers over the prototype's faded label, and remember the day Aaron handed me that first electric glow. Every grease stain and welded joint tells the story of a forgotten idea, brought back to life, and of what happens when you turn scraps into something real, something that hums with possibility. I gathered them in the living room after dinner, my worn leather folder in hand, and laid out the NGO's stamped partnership letter, alongside the annotated test report. I tapped the page showing the turbine's output curve under gusting winds, the numbers handwritten in my cramped script, and said, "They've committed to install 10 of these on remote farms." My dad glanced at the glossy letter, held it by one corner, and let it flap. "You really think that contraption in your garage can do anything but make noise?" He scoffed, tucking the paper under his arm. I watched as he turned away, dismissing the proof as if it were yesterday's mail. Brent strolled in seconds later, phone still in hand, and flipped through my printouts like they were comic strip ads. "And you believe this NGO email is real?" he asked, pointing at the official letterhead with his nose. "Maybe you're the one being played." He smirked, replaying the grainy clip on his screen of my turbine whirring in a friend's barn. "That farmer's going to laugh when he sees this on YouTube," he added, scrolling to a comment calling it rusty junk. His tone made me remember midnight oil stains on my shirt. Mom's voice cracked in my ear. 2 days afterward, as I was tightening a fan blade on the workshop bench, she said, "I don't want to see you embarrassed." Her words rushed and clipped. I could almost hear her pacing past the kitchen counter, the soft clink of a spoon against a mug. She pleaded that I pause the project until everyone's forgotten this phase, as if ignoring the signed contract front and center on the coffee table would make it go away. Even my niece, perched on the edge of the couch during that first meeting, poked her head in with wide eyes. She asked, "Will it really power our lights?" When none of us adults answered, she jumped off, kicking a stray socket wrench under the sofa. That small act, her genuine curiosity turned to dismissal, felt like the final proof that none of my evidence mattered to them. I replayed their reactions in my mind as I drove home that night, headlights illuminating the workshop sign. The sound of the turbines humming in my video captured live on Aaron's phone echoed in my thoughts, a reminder of what I'd built. I remembered Aaron's grin when the barn lights flickered to life, the way he slapped my back and said, "You did it, man." So I laid the papers aside and returned to my workbench, where the prototype stood ready for its next round of testing. The scratch of my pencil on fresh blueprints felt louder than any doubt. In that quiet space, surrounded by my own proof video stills of spinning blades, test logs stained with grease, and the NGO's formal promise, I found the only belief that mattered. My own. I'm backstage in a cavernous conference hall, the hum of voices drifting through the curtain as the host welcomes me as the founder of Rural Wind Solutions. My palms are slick against my notes, but I steady myself and step into the light. I describe my first public demonstration on a friend's farm, where I taped that battered turbine to a wooden post and watched it power a cluster of LED bulbs through an unexpected gale. The farmer grinned under his mud-splattered hat, saying, "I never thought I'd see my barn lit by wind," and patted me on the shoulder, proof that the contraption worked, right there in the dirt. Later, I slip into a tiny studio with a tech podcaster, who's read our online demo post. She holds up a tablet, showing her feed exploding with comments, farmers in distant regions asking how to build their own. I recount the night the NGO engineer flew in, her eyes bright as she described the pilot project in a remote village where our turbines kept lights on through torrential rain and powered a community water pump. She pressed a worn map into my hand, circling the village school and whispering, "You've changed their world." That moment is undeniable. Back home, I open my inbox to find a message from a European renewable distributor. The subject line teases a partnership, and inside is a photo of their rooftop test site, rows of solar panels now crowned with our slender wind adapters. They write that their team was stunned when turbines mounted on conventional arrays generated steady current during a coastal storm. Their engineer's email signature reads simply, "Let's talk deployment." It's real because I see the photos myself. A week later, a worn leather notebook arrives at my workshop door, containing the VC's letter of intent stamped with an official seal. I remember her visit. She toured my dusty workbench, skeptically inspecting my makeshift 3D printed housing, then nodded as she reviewed test logs showing consistent power output during sandstorms. She slid the paper across the bench and said, "I've never backed something so simple and so powerful." I file that letter beside my prototypes as living proof. That evening, my phone buzzes with alerts from a family chat I left years ago. There's a shared link to an industry blog calling me the junkyard genius, and my sister's comment pops up, "Who knew he had it in him?" My mother reacts with a thumbs-up emoji that lingers next to my childhood photo album, an awkward gesture, but it confirms they saw the news. I wander out to the courtyard beyond my workshop, where the original scrap metal prototype stands silent under string lights. I pat its battered frame and whisper, "You started this." Across the yard, new turbines hum on the horizon, feeding power into homes and workshops I've never visited. Every accolade, every partnership, every late-night test is proof that a chance roadside find and a stubborn idea can spark real change. and that those dusty tools in my hands weren't just junk after all. Brent's email drops into my inbox just as I'm shaking hands with a local journalist who wants to profile our micro-turbine demo. He's attached a polished slide deck, brand colors, logos, charts projecting growth in new markets. I remember the night he sat cross-legged in my garage, watching me bend metal vanes under a bare bulb, and his offhand remark that he'd invest when he had the time. Now he's offering me his extensive VC network, complete with personal introductions I never asked for. I hit reply. Impressive deck. Funny, I thought our only investors were ramen cups, and that hand-scrawled blueprint taped to the wall. Moments later, my father materializes beside a reporter, his voice loud enough for the whole lobby. We always knew he'd do great things, he says, patting the reporter's notepad, as if handing over my story. I stand behind the prototype and watch the reporter's eyes flick between Dad and me, wondering if they suspect how many nights I spent under that same jacket, welding wires by the light of a fading lantern. After the crowd thins, my phone buzzes with my mother's voice memo. She starts with warmth, recalling bedtime stories, where she urged me to dream bigger than our small town, and shifts into concern. Please remember that we raised you. That family means forgiveness. Don't let old hurts drive you away. Her tear-flavored words linger, but I can almost hear the unspoken success isn't enough unless I share it with them. That evening, I clear a message thread titled Family Ties. We're cousins, I barely know, debate board seats. One writes, I handle marketing for a non-profit, I can boost your brand. Another pleads, I've got contacts in government grants, let me help secure funding. I forward it to my attorney. These requests start and end here. I never hung invitation letters on my wall, yet here they are, lining up to ride my coattails. Later, I wander outside to where our turbines hum under the night sky. I lean against the battered frame of our first prototype, the one I patched after a storm shredded its blades. I remember discovering that rusted scrap in a farmer's shed, the blueprints hidden in a grease-stained crate, and those first successful spins that lit our workshop's dim corner. I close my eyes and feel the cool breeze catch the veins, proof that quiet nights and solitary work built this moment, not last-minute family interventions. I whisper into the wind, I got here on my own. No polished deck, no impromptu press grab, no guilt-laden pleas, just the steady rotation of each blade, cutting through doubt and echoing the truth. Real achievements aren't handed out at the table, they're carved by your own hands. I stand in the soft morning light at Clara's farm, watching blades cut the wind with a sure, steady rhythm. Clara leads me to her power box and flips open the panel, revealing a meter spinning gently instead of the usual frozen zero after last night's storm. She points to yesterday's log, where the gauge read flat until this morning's gust woke. Her eyes shine as she recalls stumbling through a blackout just days ago, reading by flashlight until the generator coughed and died. Now this turbine hums through squalls she once feared, and I feel the weight of every late night I spent reshaping that battered prototype. Down the road, I hand over a remote controller to Marcus, the high school principal, who brings me into a hallway lined with frosted windows. He grins, tugging the switch that wakes the heater, warms a classroom that once rang hollow. At dawn, he shows me a note from the science teacher, who wrote of watching steam rise from radiators instead of shivering students huddled in parkas. When she heard the furnace click, she ran outside to hug the turbine's steel post, proof that a scrap of farm junk lifted a school out of winter's chill. Back in my workshop's dusty corner, an envelope arrives with Eleanor Granger's tidy scrawl. She thanks me for bringing Paul's dream back from that silent barn. She describes finding a faded photograph of him beside a wooden crate of iron parts, blueprints rolled by his elbow and a soldering torch still warm in his hand. She admits she thought his sketches were mere doodles, until she read the blueprint margins matching the ones I restored, and it convinced her the work was real. That afternoon, I walk the narrow path to the cemetery where Paul lies beneath a weathered marker. I drape his old jacket over the stone, its cotton worn thin at the elbows, the seam where I patched it still soft. I press my hands to the pocket and slip in a scrap of paper. They laughed, but you saw the future. A gust lifts the note as if he's turning the page himself. Word drifts back from neighbors, old mechanics, who once teased me about scavenging that heat, now nodding as they watch their own turbines spin outside kitchen windows. Mrs. Ponte and Delgado from down the lane drops by with wild daisies, telling me she no longer worries when the lights blink off. She holds the petals to her cheek and says, "You saved our Thanksgiving dinner last week." Each story, every meter reading rising, every classroom warming cements the truth of what I built. When dusk settles, I look across fields dotted with those white towers, each a testament to one farmer's buried ingenuity and one boy's stubborn belief. I whisper to the wind, "This is for you, Paul," knowing every hum and whisper through these blades carries his legacy forward.